Okay. Hi, everybody. This is Abby Brodsky. As some of you may or may not know, I'm an old fart in the yo-yo community by now. I have been yo-yoing for I think like 10 years by now. It's something up there. Not as old as some of the other people that I know in the community, but I've definitely been around the block a little bit. And as many of you may know, I'm one of the few women in the actual yo-yo community. One topic that I don't see commonly brought up in the yo-yo community, or at least on like a wider scale, is one which is regarding growing the yo-yo community. So that's what I'm talking about today because I see value in this, and after going to several juggling workshops ran by my friend Afton Benson, who talks about growing the juggling community, I have realized that a lot of the things that Afton talks about absolutely apply to the yo-yo community. And since yo-yoers don't do workshops or even host workshop type events at their like contests, we are hosting it now over YouTube because this information needs to get out there for the masses, and I don't foreseeably see a better way to do it in the near future. So, let's dive into this. So, what is community? When we think of a yo-yo community, who do we think of? Who is in the community? What are these people? Based on like the general definition, community is a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attributes, interests, and goals. So that pretty much describes the yo-yo community, right? Like it's a bunch of people who get together and they like to talk yo-yos and do yo-yo tricks, which is like very exciting. So when we think on the surface of ways to grow the yo-yo community, these are the things that typically pop up. So when we think of growing the yo-yo community, these are like the stereotypical things that people say when they want to grow. So first thing on the list is like performing for non-yo-yoers. Exposure brings in yo-yoers, right? Teaching people how to yo-yo. If you teach a person how to yo-yo, they're surely going to join the community, right? Running local community events like contests, clubs, and like workshops and things. If you make a like, little yo-yo scene present, people will come, right? And teaching workshops to people outside of yo-yo. So like for me, I teach yo-yo workshops, beginner yo-yo workshops at most juggling festivals that I attend because I think it's a fun thing to learn, and it doesn't take that long for like someone to bring a yo-yo up and down. Another thing that people think when they grow a community is like having cool merchandise for events slash contests. I can't say this for most yo-yo contests in particular, but when I wear a juggling T-shirt from like a juggling festival such as like Groundhog's Day Atlanta Juggling Festival or like IJA, I get compliments on that T-shirt when I wear it out because a lot of people look at that and they might recognize it as a juggling shirt, or they look at it closer and realize it's actually not. It actually is a juggling shirt when they thought it was something else. And I get compliments on that shirt when I wear it, and people love to see that because then they look at that and they're like, "Oh, it looks like a really neat community that I can do." And then there's also the aspect of social media promotion, which a lot of yo-yos seem to see as like the only way to grow a community. So with this, it's like, can you do a DNA on TikTok? Can you make YouTube videos? Go do it if you think you can, if you think that's a way to grow the community. However, this all of these options bring up the one thing that I think a lot of people miss, and that just because you can bring a horse to water doesn't mean it's going to drink. So all of these things are great ways to grow the community in terms of exposure, but like how do you retain these people that are going to come to these events, and like what makes them stay in the community? So just because you can bring a horse to water doesn't mean it will drink. So, in my case, I have met tons of jugglers who learned how to yo-yo and enjoy it, but they don't choose to be involved in the yo-yo community because they found the yo-yo community cliquey, uninviting, and non-inclusive. And in my case, even for like the 10 years that I've been in yo-yo, and I'm sure it's like even vaster for some of the people I've been in the yo-yo community for longer, there have been several cases of like what I like to call one-hit wonders, where a person goes to a contest or a yo-yo club for the first time, they go to the event, and then they are never seen again in the community. And this is a sign of a wider spread issue in the yo-yo community because the people that choose not to get involved, because there are people out there that do yo-yo, but they choose not to be involved in the community. I get that some people are like, but it's a hobby, like yo-yo can be introverted and things. And I get where you guys are coming from. But if you want to sustain a community for longevity purposes, you have to be able to bring these people into the fold so that they feel like they are part of the community. So like why is this? Why do these people not want to come to the yo-yo to be in the yo-yo scene? Here's some reasons why people may not want to be involved in the yo-yo community. Lack of diversity. Yo-yo's main demographic is men of either white or Asian descent. And then there's a lack of inclusivity. I have seen this firsthand. I have experienced it. I have probably been part of the problem at some point. But yo-yo can be cliquier than a bunch of schoolgirls eating lunch together. Like, I was a girl in middle school. I can attest to this. I have found the yo-yo scene very cliquey at times. And for those that don't understand what cliquey might mean, it means that people tend to like congregate in tight groups and they don't really like to bring in an outsider. So let's think about this. If we think about this on a more like close up scale, let's think about how do we improve diversity if a lack of diversity is a problem in the yo-yo community. So here are some reasons first on why to care about diversity in yo-yo. Yo-yo's demographics suck. I can tell you this firsthand as a yo-yo, as a woman in the community that's a yo-yoer. Like the fact that I have not seen a substantial change of numbers of women in the community, I think speaks louder than several other things. It speaks very loudly of the yo-yo community. And then, but when I say these things, the big thing that people pigeon back to me and like parrot back to me is like, it's not our fault yo-yo was advertised to boys in the 90s, and that's why yo-yo's demographics have uh are are what they are today. And for this, I call bullshit because it's now 2025 as I'm recording this. The 90s were over 30 years ago. In 30 years, that is more than enough time to see a substantial change of women in the community. Like, case in point, for juggling, in a lot of countries, it is a 50-50 ratio of who is a juggler in terms of a gender biasy. So, if juggling can fix it within like 10 to 15 years, there's no reason why in 30 years that yo-yo can't do this. And if we care about diversity in these things, it creates a welcoming environment for all who are curious about the hobby. And then if there's a wide range of diversity because there's a lot of great representation, it means that there can be role models for everyone to look up to. Like case in point in my own experience, the only role model that was a woman in yo-yo when I was learning how to yo-yo was Anne Conley, and that was it. But when we look in the same era when I was learning how to yo-yo, every boy had like Jensen Kimmett, they had Gentry Stein, they had Evan Nagao, they had John Ando, they had a whole laundry list of people that they could look up to. And it's not fair for the people that want to get involved if they're trying to look for someone that looks like them and they don't see it in the community. That's not a sign, that's not something that brings someone into the community and more or less would probably make them feel more isolated and less inclined to join. And then if we also think about reasons to improve diversity, it improves the well-being of everyone in the community because if there's a lot of opinions and if it's everybody feels like they're represented in the community, then everybody tends to feel better. And case in point of when I describe about how yo-yo's demographics suck, this is the National Yo-Yo League's website. And if we look at all the faces that are on this homepage, these are all white boys. Or like white men within the ages of like 11 to 20. And when I look at something like this, if I was someone brand new going into the community and I saw this as the landing page for arguably the biggest yo-yo, arguably one the biggest organization in yo-yo in the United States, I don't feel welcome when I look at this. This doesn't scream like welcoming to me for someone who's a woman, and when I look at that, it makes me immediately feel like a minority in the community. So let's think about diversity in Yo-Yo. What are some ways that we can improve diversity? And let's say it's not necessarily by gender biases. So you can think of diversity in the aspects of like playstyle. So like there's like 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, 5A. There's Yo-Yo Cyclico, there's Mobius, there's Slippery Eel, there's Double Dragon in terms of styles. And these are all something that can be like shared and explored as a wider community and celebrated. And then there's also age range. It's not a secret that Yo-Yo tends to skew a little bit younger, but it also has there are some people in the community that have been yo-yoing for and they're well into like their 80s and like their 70s and 80s. So there's a wide range of potentially people that are all interested in the same thing, which can allow for a pedagogical learning environment. You can also think about religion. There's plenty of examples of this, like case in point in like the Baltimore yo-yo scene. I know of several yo-yoers that happen to be Jewish. Like it's a wider range of people, and it's people that we can consider when we're thinking about improving diversity. We also have race and ethnicity. I will recognize that even when the majority is white and Asian, people that are white or of Asian descent, like there are still other races that can be involved into yo-yo. And then there's also the aspect of gender and sexual orientation, where I can argue that yo-yo has a pretty diverse like LGBT community if people go looking for it. However, it is not easy to find on the surface. And then there's also even ways of thinking about diversity in terms of life experiences. So like someone that works a blue collar job and might be a mechanic has a very different life experience than someone who works as a computer scientist. And then we also even have even more ways to think about diversity, which is like neurodiversity, which is like someone that might have autism or ADHD or some sort of sensory processing disorder, and then be also welcomed into the fold in like ways of like how thinking can be different. So now when we think about this, if we want to think about how we can improve diverse in yo-yo, how can we make yo-yo more diverse the for the people listed here, for the different types of ways people can be different in the yo-yo community. So some easy things that can happen are pronoun pins at contests and events. Like at the IJA this year, they had juggling themed pronoun pins. You can also have wristbands with two different colors to show whether or not you're in the mood to talk or not, which can actually be very useful because for people that are neurodivergent, they may not be able to pick up on the social cues that if some yo-yoer has their headphones in and they're drilling combos like in a corner getting ready to go on stage, someone that's neurodiverse may not pick up on that fact that that person doesn't want to talk. So having something like a wristband to identify whether or not someone is in the mood to talk can be a very useful tool for them. Another aspect, having name tags. Being able to know someone's name is powerful. And then also in other ways to think about this, you can have yo-yo meetups on different days of the week to include people in your community that may not be able to attend due to religious observances such as holidays. You can also think of like potentially having meetups for minority groups at large contests. This is something that the IJA does every year, and I actually, after attending, I really appreciate because they do something called the Flamingo Club, where all the women in the juggling community, or not all of them, but whoever wants to come, can sit in on a meeting and have a chit chat and eat a slice of pizza. And they even have these meetups for people that are like in the BIPOC community, in indigenous community, even like some for like those that are neurodiverse. Like they have meetups for so many different types of people at in the juggling community, even like for the LGBT community. And these are all things that the yo-yo community can also do in their spaces when they're hosting contests. Other aspects. When ordering t-shirts for an event, you can have a variety of t-shirt sizes and cuts. IJA does this. When you register for the IJA Juggling Festival, you can say whether or not you want a women's cut versus a men's cut, and they have every size that you can possibly imagine because when they order these shirts, they have a cutoff date for the registration, and then they pick it up the day of at the festival. There's no reason why Yo-Yo can't do this. And it makes it better because, like, for someone like me, maybe I could have a Yo-Yo t-shirt in a women's cut for like the first time ever in like Yo-Yo history. Because when I've bought t-shirts for like an event, it has always been some kind of unisex or men's cut. It has never been a women's cut. Other ways that you can do this. You can provide quiet rooms or spaces to provide sensory breaks at events. Case in point, I know several people in my communities and in like social circles that I have that I know I can't bring them to a yo-yo contest because you are listening to driving music for at least 8 hours straight. You're listening to a driving beat of music and there is nowhere to escape or take a sensory break where that could be very overstimulating for certain people. Other ways you can think about diversity. You can provide food at an event to cater to potentially different dietary restrictions. So, like if you're gonna have pizza at a yo-yo contest, maybe having some that are like gluten-free options, or maybe having some that's not just pepperoni pizza, might be better for improving diversity in the community. Because someone that doesn't mix meat and dairy can then enjoy the same things that the other people in the group can do. And then you can also think about if you want to improve diversity, like especially if you were into like another style of yo-yo that isn't the one a yo-yo style, you could have workshops to teach intros to whatever play style you think is cool at an event. Like it doesn't stop at like the national level or like the national finals with like three people in the 5A finals to not do to not teach a workshop. And sometimes it might be more worthwhile because a lot of like yo-yo styles knowing where the tutorials are is a skill, and people don't always know where to go looking for those things. So having something like a workshop that can guide someone that wants to learn to get learning into that style can be very powerful. And then probably the most important on this list is self-policing and moderating. So what is self-policing and moderating? So let's say a person comes to your event and says something racist, homophobic, bigoted, just generally something not nice. Like, what do you do? A person comes to your event and then starts acting aggressive to like one of your attendees and members. So in the situation, what do you do? What do you do in these situations? At the end of the day, does your club have a policy or plan in place if someone starts acting rude or aggressive at your event? What's the protocol? What's the plan? If you run a yo-yo club or if you're hosting a yo-yo contest, you need to think about these things in advance because at the because you don't want to get to the scenario where someone is acting awry at your event and is not acting in a socially acceptable way for the community to run amok, and you can't do anything about it because you don't have a guideline or policy in place to potentially kick them out of the event if at worst possible. So now when we look at this list again for improving diversity yo-yo, what is the cost of some of these things that we can do? Like some of these things might be kind of expensive. Like providing a quiet room or space to provide sensory breaks, that's not a cheap thing to provide. Or if you're doing food costs, that can also be expensive. But if we look at the majority of this list of just examples that I've listed, pronoun pins and wristbands do not cost a lot of money to do. Having yo-yo meetups on a different day of the week, aside from scheduling for who the organizers are, doesn't have to cost any money to do. Having meetups for minority groups at large contests does not have to cost any money if you have the space. Having workshops does not cost any money to do because they are typically volunteer led, at least in the terms of the juggling community. And self policing and moderating and having a policy in place for when people start acting like dickheads at your yo-yo contest or at your yo-yo contest or at your yo-yo club does not cost any money. It just requires time to sit down and think about how do you actually want to handle people in those situations. Now, when we think about diversity, those are all really great examples. So, like, let's also think about inclusivity. What makes someone feel like they belong in the yo-yo community? And why should we care? Inclusivity improves retention rates in the yo-yo community. If someone feels like they belong in a space, they're going to want to stay in the space. People like feeling like they belong. It improves culture in the community. If there's a It improves the culture in the community. If everybody feels like belong, that means that everyone's likely to be more friendly to each other. So let's think of examples of inclusivity in yo-yo or ways that this celebrates it. You can think of like the sports division. You can think of the over 40 division. You can think of the aspect that anybody can register for a yo-yo contest to compete. And then we also have the ideas of like the women's division, which could be an example of inclusivity in yo-yo. However, I have some caveats with this, and I'm going to point this out why. So, women's division isn't inherently inclusive. Here's why. In The intention is good, but the execution is not, in my opinion. So, with the the women's division divides women in competition when, in my opinion, what should be happening is camaraderie, because the goal should be to aim for being a woman, because when, in my opinion, the goal should be a camaraderie. So why would you inherently split women apart and like divide them in a sense and have them compete against each other when people should probably looking more for like a friendship? Because I'm going to tell you from experience, being a woman in the yo-yo community is absolutely isolating. It sucks to be the only woman at the yo-yo club on the regular. Like, it's hard. So, the other aspects I don't like about the women's division is that it immediately others all the women in the community and makes them a separate entity and doesn't promote cohesion in the yo-yo community. If I hear this one more freaking time about someone going online and talking about why isn't there a men's division in the yo-yo community, I am going to go insane. It immediately others the women in the community and doesn't promote cohesion. And then, in the same vein, with the women's division being created, when the women's division was created, because I was around when that happened, I don't recall a woman ever asking for a women's division to be made, or I can't recall a woman ever being even part of the decision making process when the division was made. So if because if women were consulted in the division making, like who was asked for this division? Because I can't recall a woman ever being part of that decision making process. It also forces women to constantly have to justify their existence in this community. And it makes it hard for someone like me to get respect in the community if I constantly have to justify why something like a women's division has to exist in the yo-yo community, when in reality I don't even know of any women that even asked for a women's division in the first place. And then with the women's division running for now officially for officially 10 years now, because it started in 2014, the number of women competing has been stagnant and hasn't increased. And here's a prime example. This is the 2014 women's division. Look at the number of people on this. This is 13 women, and this is in the Czech Republic. And typically, from what I've seen in like the European countries, there typically is a little bit more women competing than like the ones in the United States. And since the World Yo-Yo Contest hasn't been in the Czech Republic recently, although it will be this year. But let's compare it to like the United States, because we have several years of like the women's division being in the United States. So for this is currently 2024. If we look at the number of women in the community, it's 8. 8 people competed in the women's division this year. And then 8 divisions. So it started at 14, it's now at 8. And if I recall correctly, in previous years, it's been around like the 7 or 8 range consistently. So this is actively proving how are not women are not the amount of women in the community has not been increasing, which indicates to me that the women's division was not a successful aspect in bringing women to the community. So if this is not a successful division in terms of bringing in diversity and inclusivity of getting women into the community, then why are we still having it? So like even if we actually look at the names on this list, yeah, some of these names are still here, but like there's a lot of people on this list on these lists that I don't think Yo-Yo anymore. Like I don't think Sarah De Amato Yo-Yos anymore. Corleen Dutois I have not seen in the actively in the Yo-Yo community. Like Mimi Tian isn't in the Yo-Yo community as far as I know. Like these names are not the same names. So like it's a consistently a new generation of women getting into the yo-yo community and then they all fizzle out, which indicates that this is not sustainable. So when we think about this again, like let's think about how we can be inclusive in the yo-yo community. Some ways that we can do this are you can give people opportunities to make friends in a yo-yo space or at a club. So in juggling, they host juggling festivals, and the way they do it, a really easy way to do this is that they host workshops. Because it turns out when like five people want to learn how to do three ball tricks with somebody, it turns out people will like actively like become friends with those people. And then other ways that you can think about improving inclusivity on like a more like personal level when you're the one in the community is that if you see someone that looks upset, you can check in with them and see how they're doing. You can also have people at other ways that you can also do it is that you can have people at contests that people can identify to talk to if there's an issue or problem or a question. Because sometimes when you are at a yo-yo contest, everybody's wearing a black t-shirt. Everybody looks the same. So if you're an organizer or somebody, it's a good idea to like identify yourself to make sure that people know who to bring their questions and comments to. Other ways you can do that. You can invite people out to eat. So even if you don't happen to know them, but you're in the general vicinity of when you're making plans, you can invite those people out to eat. Like you already have something in common with them. Like you both like yo-yo. You can go out to eat with each other and talk about yo-yo, even if they happen not to be the best yo-yoer, at least according to you. You can also improve inclusivity by making it everybody's job to teach the newbies at Yo-Yo Club. And you can also improve inclusivity by also introducing yourself to someone you haven't met. Like, if you don't know somebody at a yo-yo contest, like, it takes like less than 5 minutes for you to introduce yourself and just tell you that and have you just like say your name to them so that they know that you can potentially be a friendly face. And when we also think about this, you can also be consider yourself when you're in the community to be a role model to someone that you didn't want to have that you want to have when you were like a kid getting into yo-yo. So like for me, I didn't have any women role models in the yo-yo community. Like case in point, when I went to the Virginia State Yo-Yo contest for the first time in 2013, there were no women there. I was the only woman there yo-yoing and I was 12. So if you're thinking about this, like think about like if you're a young kid in the yoga community, how would you want to be able to interact with someone that's like older than you or like maybe around your age or like when you looked up to these people that you're interacting with or that you wanted to interact with, like how would you have wanted to interact with them? Because at the end of the day, like a lot of people probably didn't want to be blown off or like treated like the gum on the bottom of their shoe. And then another big way of improving inclusivity is applying something that jugglers like to call juggler's math, which you can absolutely apply to yo-yo, where jugglers have this logic with passing patterns and like juggling clubs and like just learning and teaching in general, where the logic is by just adding one more person to whatever you're doing already makes that activity so much better, even if it like let's say gets a little bit messy. So when you think about this, when like inviting people out, you can always invite one more person out to eat with you. You can always have include one more person into into like your circle of people that you're talking to. You can always you can always like introduce yourself to one more person to let them know that you are a face in the community that that person can talk to. So with this in mind, we can talk about a little bit of like a case study of a common problem in yo-yo that I have seen. So a kid goes to Yo-Yo Club for the first time and is super excited to go and learn some new tricks, talk with their kin for the first time, and perfect a new trick that they just learned because they just learned cold fusion and it's like so exciting. But instead, what the kid and parents find when they're going to Yo-Yo Club for the first time is that all the cooler and better yo-yoers that could definitely teach this kid a new yo-yo trick are instead standing in a corner, huddled up, talking about meta, yo-yo contest judging, and the most recent yo-yo drop. So they aren't thinking about teaching. And these guys that are like chit-chat and having a socialization hour only come to club to socialize and learn from others. So, and definitely not be teaching someone. So someone else at club is surely going to teach this kid a yo-yo trick at some point. Cause like if cause like it's certainly not my job to like walk to teach someone at yo-yo club. And it's certainly not my friend Arthur's job to teach someone at yo-yo club inherently. But instead, this doesn't happen. The kid ends up being ignored at the yo-yo club and then quits yo-yo because they found the yo-yo community sucks. Like, no one wanted to talk to them at club at all, and they rejected, and they didn't learn anything new. So they quit yo-yo because it's clear that the community didn't value them as a newbie because he wasn't talked to. So if you're that kid's view and you're embarking into the community for the first time and you are rejected in a sense for being a newbie because nobody wanted to talk to you at club because you're the new kid, what does that say about the wider community as a whole? So with the previous example, here are some ways on how we could potentially fix the previous example to potentially make it more inclusive. So you can make a rotating position at Yo-Yo Club of Yo-Yo instructor so that everybody has a chance to talk meta and socialize at the event. And or you can even like symbolize it on like a badge or something being like happy to teach. You can always, if you're at the Yo-Yo Club and someone is new, you can always greet someone when they come to Yo-Yo Club. Especially if this is the first experience for many people to get into yo-yo, it's a great idea to just get together and be like, hey, my name's Abby. It's nice to meet you. What's your name? You can also get other ways to potentially make that more inclusive is that you can involve the kid in your current conversation even if they don't know what you're talking about. So if you're talking about yo-yo contest judging with someone that doesn't know how to do a trapeze, like you can still involve them. You can still find ways to involve them into the conversation while still having like the more in-depth conversation with your friends. You could also do things like putting up a sign to say that where a yo-yo club is at. And you can even do things that are even like a little bit scary for yo-yoers, which is wearing something other than a black t-shirt to a yo-yo club event. Because think about this. If you're walking up to a yo-yo club in the park one day without prompting, all the yo-yoers are gonna be wearing a black yo-yo t-shirt. Like, they're all gonna be wearing a black t-shirt and like huddled in a horde, like talking with each other, doing yo-yo tricks. If you're looking at that from afar, like what makes that a welcoming environment for someone that is brand new to the community? So, in the sense, like, use your common sense if you're going to be going at a club or if you're going to a contest. Like, it's not hard to think of, like, solutions to the previous example, yet it makes the whole, like, a world of difference to the people that are trying to get involved in the community. So, when we think about ways to improve inclusivity, like, the general gist of all of the examples I have given of, like, introducing your name, just inviting someone out to lunch if you're gonna go out to lunch, like generally being like a nice person to people, like if you are a decent person with social skills, you are probably doing like a lot of the grunt work that it takes to be inclusive in the yoga community. Like it's not hard to just involve another person into a conversation. Like it's not hard to think of something like juggler's math and apply it to yo-yoers. So when we also think about other aspects to include inclusivity, all of the things listed in terms of diversity also apply to yo-yo. So having pronoun pins at contests, that makes it a more inclusive environment for people that are in the LGBT community as well. Having wristbands, it helps. Having different colored wristbands can help with people that are neurodivergent, and that would make them feel welcomed and belonging in the community if it shows that someone cared about them in that way. Having yo-yo meetups on different days of the week due to religious observances makes someone that might be Jewish or Muslim feel welcome in the community because it means that people respect and value them in the space. Hosting meetups so people can find each other is a great way to be inclusive because that means that those people can find kin that are like themselves. And ordering t-shirts means that everybody can have a cool t-shirt, and that means that everybody gets to be part of the same cool club. Like everything listed here also helps improve inclusivity in Yo-Yo. So, in the grand scheme of things, like, what did we learn? So, in the in the big gist, growing the community is not just the job of an organizer or a famous musician to champion yo-yo for. It's not the job of just a TikToker to grow the community. It is the job of everybody in the community. And you yourself can be the change you want to see in the yo-yo community. So small actions can make a big difference. Like, if you want to be improving inclusivity and diversity in the yo-yo community, if you want to see the yo-yo community grow, you can do this by just doing the bare minimum of like introducing yourself or taking someone out to having someone join you for lunch, or like just saying what your name is or being nice to that kid that's looking for a role model in the yo-yo community. Like these small things can make a huge difference in terms of like how like who gets retained in the community, and then it fixes a lot of the things that we are perpetually seeing potentially, like the lack of women in the community, or the fact that there's an age gap in the yo-yo community, or like the fact that people tend to fall off of yo-yo with in their 20s and then never return. So these are all things that can happen. So with that in mind, we are done. Congratulations, you heard this fantabulous rant, and now you can go shout this knowledge to all your other yo-yoers in the space, and you can start thinking about ways on how you can have these discussions with your local yo-yo community if you have one, or you can start thinking about on an individual level, like how can you yourself be part of growing the community, because it's not just the job of an individual to grow the yo-yo community. It's not just the job of like Gentry Stein to do a yo-yo trick to get people into the community. It is the job of every single individual in the community to grow it and to sustain it and to make it the welcoming environment that people want it to be, or see a vision for it to be. Alrighty, so that is all. Have a great day. I don't know if you're gonna see any other rants from me. This is just like kind of a one-off thing. Um, so share this around if you think it was a valuable thing to think about. Have a fantabulous day.